Take two. Hello, friends. Welcome back to my Books Build Life channel. So today I'm looking a little teachery because I'm trying to film this while having it subtitled at the same time. So we'll see if this works. So hey. So today I bring you my February wrap up. This month I read 7 books. Let me grab my journal. 7 books, right? Yeah, I think 7 books. So I want to talk to you about them because I read some awesome books. Also, my Latinx author column is beating my white author column. It's a miracle. And the reason being is because I started this year off with 8 Latinx author books, and I've already read 10, and that's not including the ones on my shelf because I've gotten Latinx authors' books from the library. But I'm getting myself out there, and I love it. So thank you. Hashtag Con Sabor Reading Challenge. Do it with us. Okay, so the first book I read was actually part of the hashtag Con Sabor Reading Challenge, and it fulfilled our mental health tag for the month of February. Was it February or the month of January? January. It fulfilled our tag for the month of January. And I love the Library of Lost Things, and I'll read a little bit from what I wrote. So I was thinking that I love this book because like books have always been a place for me to escape, and I've always been too afraid to jump too far because I don't have a reference from books to tell me what's going to happen afterwards. And I absolutely love this book because Laura Tinami, which is like my absolute favorite Latinx author right now, she totally wrote my Narnia. This is a book that I will straight up walk into a door and live in this world forever. I love it. I have a best friend named Marisol in this book, and she is just everything that I am as a friend. So when I saw her, I was like, what? And then Darcy, the main character, is everything I am as a person, like personally, my life. She loves books. She was sort of like teased about it in school, about always having her nose stuck in a book, always taking her book everywhere, to lunch, to class, to like, I was always reading or at the library. And sometimes people kind of wanted to talk about that in a not so nice way. So I liked seeing that. I also like the mental health points that this book made about how all of us are messy, and just in different ways, and people just have to accept each other's messiness when they get into a relationship, if they so wish. And the other thing that I loved was absolutely Darcy and Asher's relationship. So all the demisexual vibes. This relationship developed so organically, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And it's the first book I've read that actually made me want to read another book. It definitely made me want to pick up Peter Pan. If y'all read the book, y'all know why. You'll also want to read Peter Pan. And so I love seeing Latinx culture in the book, in the food. I just wanted to eat the whole time. And also keep in mind that I loved Asher because this will come up in another part of this video. So yes, Library of Lost Things by Laura Tinami, and I rated it 5 stars. Yes, so excited. All right, book number 2 for the month of February was called Everything is Beautiful and I'm Not Afraid by Yao Xia. So this one is by a bisexual Chinese immigrant author, which like immediately caught my eye. It's also a book written in verse. Yes, that's the word, in verse. And it's also a graphic novel. So it had like 3 of my favorite things: diverse authors, graphic novels, poetry. I mean, what can I say? I did rate it a 3 out of 5, and I'll explain. This is a super important book. It just wasn't for me. It does highlight a very important part of society, Chinese immigrants who have different sexualities or identify as a different gender. Is very complicated in their cultural structure to come out and be open about those kind of things, which is why I was intrigued by this concept and this hashtag own voices story in the first place. The wording was a little bit complex for me, and that worries me because I think this book was targeted towards a younger audience. so they could feel seen. And I think the vocabulary was a little bit too elevated for the audience it was trying to go for. But I do admit that this is a very important book that should see the light of day. If it was allowed in China, I would totally share it with my students. I most definitely know I have students who identify differently, and most of the time, our students feel comfortable coming to us as foreign teachers because we are open here in the United States about that. But, you know, further than us supporting them as their teachers and giving them a safe space to speak and be themselves, that is pretty much the only influence we have. It's not like they can be public about it just because they have our support. Um, we're only with them 45 minutes to an hour of the day, and obviously they wouldn't want to hurt their relationship with their family and friends. So I think this is a book that should be given access. I love that it's out there so other Chinese kids can get their hands on it if they can, especially if they've recently moved here, and they're looking for some guidance. I think it's going to be a great book. It wasn't for me. So over here, everything is beautiful and I'm not afraid by Yao Xiao. The third book I read this month was Frozen 2, The Forest of Shadows. Yes, Frozen 2 has a prequel, and this is it. So I rated this book 4 stars. Okay, friends, this book is amazing, and it should have been made into its own movie. So I hope they do like Frozen 2 prequel and they make a Forest of Shadows, because like it would have been like Frozen thriller in a familiar world. It literally has all these secrets. We get to learn about other side characters that come out in Frozen 2, because this book ends 15 minutes into the newly released movie. So you get some of the background on how they got to this mystical kind of thing. I feel like when I saw Frozen 1 and then I saw Frozen 2, I was like, how did we get here? So yeah, Frozen 2, Forest of Shadows deserves its own movie. So I just had to put that out there. Frozen 2, Forest of Shadows by Camila Benko. Go get it. The fourth book I read was Giants Beware. This was by Puerto Rican author and illustrators, which is like, yes, Puerto Rico. Anyways, by Jorge Aguirre and Rafael Rosado. I rated this graphic novel a 4, and I absolutely love it. It was basically, it turned my expectations on its head. I totally believed the initial storyline, and then I was basically taught, don't judge a book by its cover, young lady. So I guess it's the same point for children, and I fell for it, but like, yes, I got the point. And the theme of the story is like, don't judge a book by its cover. Gender roles are basically reversed. I love seeing that the girl was the one that wanted to go kill the giants, and she was the strong one, and she was the warrior. And they did have like also like her little brother wanted to be the cook, and he wanted to be the swordsmith, and he wanted to be the one who was around the house. And I love that because like the little brother was so cute. And I just love the overall message of the story about friendship, honesty, and not seeing things at face value. And overall, the book just didn't turn out as expected. I know the Giants Beware series is a series, so there's more of them, and I'm really excited to read the rest of them. Then we have my fifth book, I think. Let me, apparently I forgot to count. Yes. My fifth book is called How Tia Lola Came to Visit/Stay. This is a Dominican story by a Dominican author. And this beautiful book basically mentioned quipes and ñapas, and it made me crave my Dominican life. I'm half Puerto Rican, half Dominican, but born and raised in Puerto Rico. But like half of the foods, and actually not half of the foods, all of the foods in these books are my jam. I enjoy them. I love them. They're part of me. Tia Lola certainly reminded me of my mom, and the characters totally related just what I went through in life as I moved from Puerto Rico to the United States, and my conflicts of belonging and speaking Spanish and whether I was ashamed of that or proud of that, and how I was going to show that to people. And I wrote a review, like a book review reflection about it on my blog, so you can go check that out. I'll link it below, where I talked about how the book related to my personal experience, and it really touched me. I rated it 5 stars. And particularly what caught my attention was the author's note at the end, talking about Dominican Spanish and the way she had used Dominican Spanish in the book. And that was interesting because I wouldn't have thought that the author's note was necessary, because one should assume that Spanish is not the same in every country, and that the fact that she might get criticized for the Spanish being portrayed a different way than other people saw it was very interesting. But I definitely saw it as Dominican Spanish because I speak Dominican Spanish, so I was very happy that it was portrayed as it was, in its organic form, and it really just made me feel like home. So I just absolutely loved it, and it just shows how you need to learn to love yourself despite all the feelings of not belonging, and you need to, how do is it, feel wrapped up in your culture and hugged by it while still trying to belong in a society, and feel empowered by it. And I feel like I'm still on that journey, and in recent years I've become more open about it, and I'm just really excited for that part of my life. So, How Tia Lola Came to Visit, Stay by Julia Alvarez. And yes, then we have my 6th book, Donde Rosa Santos. So you'll remember how I said you had to remember that I loved Asher from the first book I mentioned. So my beautiful, lovely companions at the hashtag Consawar Reading Challenge, fellow co-hosts and creators, they were roasting me in this live show because I rated Donde Rosa Santos over here. I can't get my size straight. A 3.5. Now, let me talk about this. It's not that I didn't like the book. I actually loved it. I just didn't love it as much as Library of the Lost Things, you know? And like, what is one supposed to do? Anyways, it was funny roasting. It was hilarious. Probably one of the funniest live shows I've ever been a part of. And I'm so glad that Anox Reads roasted me because I have never laughed so hard in my life. I love the atmosphere of this book. I love that Santeria was treated so respectfully. This is a kind of religious practice that I saw my friends be a part of when I lived in Puerto Rico, and it was always kind of talked bad about and kind of talked about like witches and stuff, and like people would kind of bully my friend about it, but I also always thought that it was like super cool that she did participate in that, and I'm glad that it was handled very respectfully in this book and in a very reverential way, which is the way it was seen to her family. I loved Alex and Rosa and battling their fears and battling the unknown, and I loved their backstory. It was very unique. I wish I had seen more of Alex and Rosa, which is what I felt lacked. I didn't see as much of their connection throughout the book as I would have wanted. There's these viejitos that like to gossip on Instagram in the book. I wish I would have seen more of them. I had this idea that they would create a little bit more of chaos, but they were kind of just like there in the background. And also, the main conflict is a little bit of magical realism about how there's a curse because everybody's partner has died at sea, and Rosa now decides to date a man that also goes to sea. That part didn't sit well with me because I've been a sailor before, and we're all very aware that going out to sea is dangerous, and the people who we date or our families know that, like, you know, not coming back from a sailing is a possibility. So like that kind of part where like sailors at the marina and the people that worked at the marina believed in this curse was kind of unbelievable to me personally, but that's just because of the personal experience that I come with. So I don't think that would deter anybody else. I actually think a lot of people loved that particular aspect of magical realism in the book, but for me personally, I was like, all right, we can knock that off a little bit. And the Santos woman, I love how their story developed between the mom, the grandma, um and oh my god, and Rosa, forgot the character's name. And Rosa, and I love seeing that develop. I love seeing the Cuban culture that was brought into the book. the expectations of Latinx families on their kids to succeed, to pursue education, to make something of themselves. I also like seeing the community in the book. It kind of felt like how my family felt when we lived in Puerto Rico, and how one city was very close to each other and you knew your neighbors and they knew you and that kind of thing. So that was super touching to me, which is why it's a 3.5. I loved it. I would totally recommend it. I just didn't love it as much as I wanted to. So there's the tea, folks. So Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. And last but not least, I read The Devil's Highway by Luis Alberto Urrea, and I gave it 4 stars. And okay, so this book is a little harrowing. I decided to pick up this book because of the AD drama that happened in January. So let's all read actual immigrant stories from actual Latinx authors. So I decided to read Luis Alberto Urrea's The Devil's Highway. It was one of the books mentioned in the author's notes or inspirations for AD. So I was interested in reading the actual source. The one thing I love about the author himself is that the way he writes his books are very like informative, but very relax considering the catastrophic information that he's sharing with you. So I felt like every time I didn't want to read or I was in a sort of reading slump, I still wanted to pick up his book. Not only because I was intrigued about what's going on, but because I didn't feel like it was going to take a lot of effort to read through his words, which make his book so special to me. And like, I just received his second book from the library and I'm really excited. So basically every time I don't feel like reading, I still gravitate towards finishing his books, which I think is an immense like props on his writing style. Basically, this story tells the Mexican immigrant story about the Welton 26. I also didn't know a lot about it. It happened before our time. So, or at least when we were like young. So definitely Google it. It was a crazy story where 26 people went into the desert, but only 12 came out alive. It became big news. It tried to change immigration policies at the border. And it's sad to say it didn't change much considering the amount of life that was lost. But it also gives a really good inside look at Border Patrol, at the coyote system, at how people get through the desert in the first place and how that is controlled, why people choose to do that journey. And I love that this book was so detailed, but the book was never bogged down or slowed down by it. It kept a steady pace, which I find really hard with books that are detailed, but Urrea really does this so well. And also the way he described hyperthermia, which is the opposite, is when heat and like heat exhaustion and that kind of stuff takes over, was so poetic and catastrophic yet not graphic, in the sense that I feel like he didn't have to sensationalize the story to make you see how horrible of a situation it was. And I appreciate that because it feels like an honest rendition of the story versus like, oh, let me shock you with these events, which comes from being an own voices author, and sharing stories of people that are from where you are. And I just honestly, I'm just sad that more reform didn't come from this unspeakable tragedy. But if you want to read something about immigration, based on a real story by a Latinx author, I highly recommend reading The Devil's Highway by Luis Alberto Urrea. It's not a long book. It's so peacefully informational that you'll always want to go pick it up, even when you're not in the mood to be reading, and totally deserves all the praise. So I read 7 books this month. I'm really excited about a project that's coming up with travels and fiction, and I can't wait to share it with you. And I hope you enjoyed these books and that you pick one of them up if you're interested. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!